Hey guys, it's Tahira, and today I'm doing a recent reads video. So I'm going to be talking about the last 10 books that I've read since my last recent reads video, which was I think in May. So basically in the past couple months, I think. I've actually read quite a few more books than I thought I have in the past couple of months, so that's great. But it is summer and I always read a lot more during the summer because I am home and I don't have school to worry about. So I'm gonna be talking about the 10 books that I've read in the summer so far. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start talking about the books because really no one really wants to hear me talk. But the first book I'm going to be talking about that I read was The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, which I gave a 3 stars. So I personally have a lot of conflicting feelings about this series as a whole because I really struggle to identify or connect with the writing style of this series. So the way this book is written, it's half in third person and half in second person. So second person is something that's usually never used in books because it uses the you format, so you, the reader, are the main character basically, which kind of throws me off a lot, especially as I'm in the beginning of the books for this series. It just takes me a lot to get used to that point of view before getting into the story. And because of this very unusual writing style, I think a lot of the story is going over my head, and so I'm not retaining a lot of it, which is so sad because I've heard so many good things about it, and I can definitely see why this is a really loved series and why everyone hypes it up so much. I can definitely see its redeeming qualities. It's just the specific writing style of second person and the way it's written just sometimes just hasn't been connecting with me so far. So because I'm finding it difficult to stay connected to the story, I feel I'm losing a lot of it. But this is definitely a series that I think I want to revisit sometime in the future. I think I'm gonna hold off reading the 3rd book before I reread the first 2 because I really want to enjoy that one. And I'll definitely revisit sometime and then read it a lot slower and really try to grasp who the characters are, what the story is, and everything. So hopefully I'll enjoy it more when I do that, because right now it's just I'm really not enjoying it as much. But I definitely do want to go into the 3rd book having a good refreshed sense of the story and everything. So I think before that I'll be rereading the 2. I don't know when that's gonna be, but definitely I will do it sometime in the future. So the 2nd book that I have read is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I gave 4.5 to 5 stars. And this one I don't have a copy because my sister actually borrowed it from her English teacher and I borrowed it from my sister, and so she has since returned that book back to her teacher. But I actually really enjoyed this a lot more than I actually thought I would. Actually, now that I look back at my rating, it's more a 4 to 4.5, but still a very highly rated novel for me, and I really loved it. So everyone knows pretty much, but if you don't know, Malibu Rising is a kind of historical fiction novel following these 4 famous siblings, and one day they have a party at their house, and at the end of the house ends up burning down. So it's kind of a story about what happens and everything. But what I didn't know, because the way the synopsis makes it out, is that the entire story is just about this one night at this party, but the party is actually a very small part of the story. The main story is these 4 kids, their childhood and them growing up and what that was like for them, because their father is a famous musician, and so he was gone a lot of the time. He was very in and out of their lives. He would come back with all these promises that he's a good man, but then he'd go and cheat on their mom and everything. So it was just not a good whole environment for them. And those past that half the part of the book that was in the past with them growing up, I loved that a lot. And those when I say I love this book, is that part. I did not love the present storyline as much with the whole party and everything, because a lot of the present storyline is them preparing for the party throughout the day, and then the very last bit of the last part of the book is the actual party itself, and what occurs during that night. But the part where it's in the past, where they're growing up and everything, that's the part that I loved so much, because their father is very in and out of their lives and very absent. Nina's the oldest sister, and she ends up being the main caretaker of all her brothers and her siblings. So that whole dynamic of her being the little caretaker and everything was just so adorable, and I really enjoyed reading about their dynamic because it was just so cute. But yeah, same thing about why I adopt a star, is because the present storyline was just a little bit boring and repetitive for me, and there was not really much that happened towards the end with that party. So that is like one of the reasons why I'm giving it a 4 stars instead of like a 5 stars. But overall, I still really enjoyed this book. The next book I got from the library and I have returned, but that is The Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Bali Kaur Jaswal, which I gave like 4.5, 5 stars, and I also really enjoyed this book. So this one is about a woman named a name that I have completely forgotten at this point, but she is looking to get a job and she finds this like bulletin board like posting of this job to be like a teacher to teach English and writing to these group of like Punjabi women. And what she doesn't realize is that these group of Punjabi women actually need to learn how to like physically write and read and everything, like learning the English alphabet. But what she thinks it's like more of a fiction writing class, so she goes into this class thinking like it's a fiction writing class, and all these women are obviously confused. And then one day these women find a book with erotic stories in it, and with that they start like sharing their own stories and their desires and their wants. And then the main woman that I'm like completely forgetting her name, she like discovers that all these women actually have like all these great stories inside of them that no one really takes the time to hear. So like then they start sharing their stories in their native language, but she like kind of helps them to bring out these stories, and they end up like sharing all about their lives. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. One of the things I really loved was how it really gave a lot of personality to these Punjabi widows. Usually in our culture, like South Asian culture, like it's usually like widows or like people that are not married anymore, that are like older, usually aren't really thought of as having all these like desires and wants. But I think that this book really brought out that all these women really do have their own thoughts and feelings, but no one really takes the time to like talk to them about it, or for them allows them to express it, especially because South Asian culture can also be kind of hush about things like sex. So giving them this outlet to express themselves in this way was just like a completely new thing for them as well, and they had like a lot of fun with it, and you can really tell when you read this story. The one thing I will say is that it got a lot over the top at the very end, and there was like some things I just couldn't believe, like the way they happened. But overall, like that didn't really hinder my enjoyment of the rest of the story, and I love this story so much, and I'll definitely like look to picking up this author's other work if they have any, because I really enjoy the writing style as well. So yeah, this one is definitely a book that's like I fully read because Kayla from Books and Lala like read it in a vlog and then rated it 5 stars. So like, and the premise sounded interesting, so I had to pick it up, so I'm like really glad that I enjoyed it. The next one is another book that I read from the library and because of Books and Lala, but that is Finley Donovan is Killing It by El Casamano. This one is a mystery, like fun mystery, like thriller novel that follows this woman named Finley Donovan, and she is a writer and she is working to get her next book submitted, and she's like literally at a Panera with like her agent or editor or something, and they're talking about this book that she's thinking of writing, and it's like a murder mystery, but the woman that's next to them thinks that she's actually like a murderer, so she falls into this like murder for hire scheme because this woman ends up offering her some money to take care of like killing her husband. So as you can see, it's like very over the top and very like fun, but I thought like it was really enjoyable because of that. It was a fun story. It had a lot of twists and turns. I don't know if I like fully connected with it, and that's why I didn't end up giving it a higher rating. I thought it was like a fun story. I didn't like really love it. I will definitely think of picking up the second book in this series. The only thing is that I feel like after reading this book, I feel like this series in general could definitely be looking into falling into kind of a formula trap where like she gets like hired by someone, she has to kill them, blah blah blah, a lot of things happen at the end, she like figures it all out, and then because the end of this book she gets like another note to murder like someone else. So I hope like the second and third book kind of do something different than the first book, but I will definitely be checking the sequel out, and I'll be hoping that is good and fun as this one. The next book is a highly popular book that has been making the rounds on like all the book social media like communities and everything, and everyone has been talking about it, and that is A Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. And this is a fantasy novel following this girl named Violet, who is the daughter of a general, and she goes to this like academy where like people become fighters and they're like dragons, and it's like a really fun like fantasy romance book. And I gave this like 5 stars. I like loved it a lot, and the reason I really love this is because while I was reading it, all I could think was how much it reminded me of when I loved to read these types of books, like specifically Sarah J Maas back in like 2015, and this was just giving me all those vibes. So I just had to pick it up, and I had such a fun time reading it. I think it's so fun and addicting, and even though like I know there's a lot of like world building issues, and just like the writing itself is like not that great, and the book itself, like the craft, the way it's written is like not amazing, but just because like how much fun I had it, I'm like rating it so highly. Apparently I actually rated this book 4 stars, but I said 5 stars, so like it really shows how much I really enjoyed it. The only thing is like I thought the ending was a little bit predictable. Like I didn't predict it, but when I read it I wasn't really shocked because it was very like stereotypical ending, and it reminded me a lot of a certain ending of a certain like YA dystopian series in like 2013. Like I'm not gonna really spoil anything, but if you've read it you probably know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I'm like highly anticipating the second book in this series. I know it's like coming out this year in November, which I'm like so surprised that, because this literally just came out in May I think, and the second book is already coming like 6 months after that, so this author is like keeping us fed. But I'm really excited, and I can't wait to see where the story goes, and hopefully we get a little bit more explanation of like all the explanations of some of the world things that we didn't really get in this book. But yeah, we'll definitely be reading that as soon as it comes out. Then we switch genres to a YA romance, and that is Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. This one I gave like 3.5 stars. This one is a, as I said, YA contemporary romance novel by Talia Hibbert, and I think this is her YA debut because she typically writes adult romance novels, which are like, you've probably heard of them, like Get a Life Chloe Brown, Take a Hint Danny Brown, Actor H Eve Brown. Like the Brown sisters are a very popular romance series or like trilogy by her. So she's generally known for adult novels, but this is her YA debut, and so of course I had to pick it up and see what it was like, and I did enjoy it. I think YA romance is something that I just might not enjoy as much as adult, honestly. So this one follows our 2 main characters, Bradley and Celine, and Bradley is they're both in high school. He is a high school student and he has OCD, and Celine is this like over the top achiever and like overachiever and tries to like get everything. And for her college applications, they both applied to this like survival course that will like help them get into college. I don't know, it was like the survival competition, so they both join it and they're both like put together because of it, and they are also rivals because of like some childhood thing that happened in their past. And so because of the survival thing, they have to like be close to each other and be together. So obviously it's like a rivals to lovers. They end up like falling in love through this whole survival thing. So this story is about that. This one is, I would say, like very cute, but it was not as what I was expecting, because this book is like marketed as like almost enemies to lovers or like rivals to lovers, but really that like whole storyline didn't end up really panning out, because they were rivals and then they kind of cleared up their misunderstandings, and then they were friends, and then they were lovers. So it was really enemies to friends to lovers rather than just enemies to lovers. And I wish it was kind of enemies to lovers rather than bringing friendship into it, because then the tension kind of just dissipated after. Like the tension was still there because they weren't admitting their feelings to each other, but I think it would have been so much higher if they had remained like rivals in some sort of way before declaring their feelings for each other. But yeah, I think overall just this one didn't just fully connect with me, and I think I would much rather read her adult romance novels, and we'll definitely be looking out for those from Talia Hibbert. But yeah, this one I think is just not something I really like loved fully. The next one is a really popular memoir that came out I think last year or the year before, I don't remember, but that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. Jeanette McCurdy was a really famous Nickelodeon star. She was known for playing Sam and Cat and in iCarly. But this book really does deep dive into her life, especially specifically focusing on her life as like a childhood star, her relationship with her mother, and just like what it was like to grow up in that environment. Her mother, if you didn't know, was a very toxic woman who really like cultivated a really toxic environment of being this like child actress, which was the whole thing was her mom's dream, and also like giving her an eating disorder. This I will say about this book is this book is very, very graphic in its depictions of like eating disorder habits as well as like consequences. So if that's something like that you would be uncomfortable with, I would definitely not recommend this book because it is very hard to read at times. Honestly, I don't even know what to say about a memoir just because this is so personal and she's obviously being so vulnerable putting this out into the world for everyone to read. I think the writing is also really good. Like I think the writing is also fantastic, and I think Jeanette McCurdy does have a talent in writing, so I hope that she keeps writing like more in some way. I don't know what that would be, but I really hope that she keeps writing, and I would definitely pick it up to see what that's like. And it's so trippy now because like you know of all these dark things that were happening while she was filming all these shows. So it's almost so weird to like go back and think about watching these shows again, because like I know that like she's going through all these terrible things while she's filming these episodes. So I definitely won't be able to like watch those shows again with like the same brain or mind as I used to, because I'll know about all these like dark things that were happening at the same time. The only thing like I don't fully get is like the purpose of this memoir. I don't know if it's like a way for her to just like vent and like share her story with the world, which I'm sure that is the purpose, but in the end there wasn't really like, maybe I don't have an experience with memoirs, but there wasn't really like an end where it was like a lesson that she learned or something that she like reveals or like a revelation for her. It was just more like an end to a story, and it was just kind of the end. I don't know how to explain it, but other than that, I thought it was fantastic. It was very dark, it was very disturbing, but if you can handle it, I would highly recommend this one. The next one, completely different, another YA romance one that is actually my sister's, but that is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This one is about a girl named Liz and this guy named Wes, and they're like enemies from childhood, and there's this guy named Michael that comes back. He like moved when they were younger, he comes back after years, and Liz wants to get Michael, and like she likes him, she thinks he's cute. So she kind of enlists the help of Wes because Wes is kind of close with Michael in a little bit. So it's like she uses his help to kind of get closer to him. And through that, she gets closer to Wes and realizes that like she actually loves Wes. So it's like the classic like enemies to lovers. And I think this book did such a fantastic job of executing it. I gave this book 4 stars. It was so cute. I think even though like again for this one, I think the rivalness wasn't enough for me. And I don't know if it's like a YA thing, but it just wasn't as intense as I wanted it to be. But I think despite that, I think their banter was just so great and so cute. Also, this book deals with a lot of loss and grief because Liz, I don't know if this is a spoiler, I don't think it is because it's revealed pretty early on, but Liz's mom has died, and so she has to deal with like the grief and the loss of her mother as well. And I really liked how like the author wove in that grief and loss throughout the book, and how it was like always present and everything, and I just in that regard I also loved it. So I think overall this is just a really adorable book that dealt with a lot of like important things as well, but it's just overall it was well written and executed well. The banter was great, and the romance in general at the end was just the way it all came together was just it was so good. I do know that there's a sequel either already out or coming out sometime soon, I think. So I will definitely be reading that to get like more of their story because they're just so cute together. The next book is a reread that I read because honestly I'm behind on my Goodreads goal. And so when I'm behind, I always like read this series. And so I read Heartstopper by Alice Oseman because this is a graphic novel, so it's like really quick to read. I can read this in like less than an hour. So of course I had to pick it up because like I just need to be on track for my Goodreads goal. There's no other way. I can't be behind. If you didn't know, my Goodreads goal is 50 books and I'm like at 20 something books right now. So I'm like perpetually like ish, sometimes 7 books behind, and so like I'm gonna use these and like the rest of the series to like catch up hopefully. And I know that's kind of cheating, but it's not, because on Goodreads it's not cheating, so it's not cheating. But yeah, everyone knows I give this 5 stars. I've talked about this book so many times, like literally so many times, so I really am not going to talk about it anymore. But yeah, 5 stars for me, very adorable, and that's it. The next book I actually did not plan on picking up, but I read this because of a video, and that was my last reading vlog where I did a scavenger hunt to pick what I read. And through that like scavenger hunt, it told me to read The Taking of Jake Livingston by Ryan Douglas. So I read that for a whole vlog. I'll link it down below. It's like my last video as well, so you can go find it. You should definitely go watch it. But this one is about a guy named Jake, and he is a medium, which means that he can like see the dead world. And he lives in this like city, Clark City, I think, that's like kind of a hood adjacent city, really far from his really elite private school, with like almost all white private school, and he's the only black kid there. And then his neighbor gets killed or murdered, and then the ghost of that killer is like haunting or stalking him or something. So basically it's like a survival story of him trying to like survive it, but it's really not. I gave this 2.5 stars. I didn't like it that much. It's less than 250 pages. It was trying to do a lot of things in such a short amount of time. I will say the darker scenes did get pretty dark and way more intense, and it was just trying to do a lot because it was trying to address like things about racism and microaggressions, because he was the only black kid, as well as him being a medium, as well as like this stalker, as well as like this new romance that he started budding with this other new black kid that joins his school. And so all those like things that I just talked about, they tried to do in less than 250 pages, and it's like marketed in a way that's like marketed like based on the synopsis to be like a YA horror story, which like in some ways it was, but like in a lot of ways it wasn't. So I wish I would have focused on that a little bit more, or if it wanted to focus like on everything else too, like making the book bigger or longer as well, I think would have done a good job of like fleshing out the story a little bit, as well as like going to a little bit more depth of all these issues it's trying to touch on. But yeah, more thoughts will be in my vlog, so check that out. But yeah, I give this 2.5 stars, so not great. Anyways, those are all the 10 books that I read in the past like couple of months. Let me know down below if you read any of these books, and if you have, let me know what you think of them, as of course I would love to know. But that is for this video. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye.